Greetings, accordion aficionados and other people. Okay, so this is kind of an extension of video 4A. I did 4A and I was trying to show the fingering with the little cell phone camera and explain the tones and such at the same time, and it was very difficult. So I'm making this little add-on video in case anybody got confused. Sometimes I speak so poorly or try to throw in too much and it gets cluttered and maybe a little confusing. So in the last video we were talking about dominant chords. We looked at the dominant 7, let's say the C7. That's what we looked at. And we showed how to play it on the accordion in a traditional position, which means playing the C bass and the C7 button, the C7th button. And when you did that, you got the tone C, E, and B flat, because on the Stradella system, on the 7th row, the 5th tone is not sounded. In other words, the G that normally would be in there is not in there. Okay, I think that's pretty clear. I've repeated that many times. Now, if you want to play the C7 with all the tones in it, in other words, all 4 tones, then I showed you in the video, hold on, I showed you in that video that you need to play the C bass with the G diminished button. You'd have to play the C bass with the G diminished button, and if you do that, you will get the C, the E, the G, and the B flat. Then you get all 4 tones of that 7th chord. So I think that's pretty clear. Sometimes I write diminished G with just a little O, some musicians use the little O to stand for diminished. That's how I do it myself, and I do it that way in my book. So I think that's pretty clear. The C bass with the G diminished button, and you get all 4 tones. Now, if you want to make it a little sweeter, you can play the C9 or the C dominant 9, and that will give you these tones, the C, E, G, B flat, and D. And you do that by playing the C bass button, the C7 button, and the G minor button. That M, the lowercase m with the little line across it, means minor, and it distinguishes it clearly from the capital M, so that if somebody writes sloppily like I do, you won't get confused. You'll know clearly that that's a major, and you'll know that that's a minor. So then you get the C, E, G, B flat, D. And what happens here is, of course, you get the C in the bass. That's a given. But you get the G, B, and D flat tones from the G minor button. And then you get the C, E, and B flat from the C7 button. That's how you get all that stuff. Now, this B flat tone here is duplicated, but that's no big deal. Don't worry about that for now. That's how you get the C dominant 9 on the accordion. The C bass with the C7 button and a G minor button. Now, between these two videos, 4A and 4B, that should be very clear. Then I talked about the so-called suspension chords. And we talked about what traditionally would be known as a C7 with the suspended fourth tone. We talked about that. And that would be a C, and F, and here's the octave C, and there's the B flat. But we also mentioned that we really can't play this structure with the buttons on the left hand of the accordion. I did mention that, made that clear. Here's the C, F, B, C. That's a C7 with the suspended fourth tone. The suspended fourth tone is this F. All right? So what you want to, the goal is in making a sound, making that transition sound, is to transition to other notes. So the C would go to C, that'd be probably the octave. The B flat would stay the same. But the F would transition to the third, the E, and the C to the tonic, or whatever. And then you'd end up back with your full C7. You'd go from the C7 with the suspended 4 to the regular C dominant 7. Now, if you're paying attention, you'll know that to go from this to this, on the accordion there's two problems. One, you can't, as I said, you can't play this structure with any buttons on the left hand of the accordion. And this here, to get this full C7, you'd have to, remember, play the C bass with the G diminished button. Or you might spell it G-D-I-M. So that's the only way you do that. So as it stands, me personally, I cheat a little bit. I forget about this, just forget about it. And I change this to a C9 with the suspended 4. Remember that? That was in the video 4A. So with the C9, the tones would be C, E, G, B flat, and D. That would be the tones of the C9. It's dominant 9. Complete. So this chord would be with the suspended 4. Now that's a C9, but with the suspended 4, you'd kind of have a D, B flat, and F, and no third. You see, no third now, and then the C. So, you can play this on the accordion. This is the nice thing about it. You can play this because if you can play this, then you can resolve or transition to or progress to where you want to go. Now, you see here that the fifth is missing. The fifth that normally would be there is missing, and that doesn't matter. A lot of times, even in non-accordion music, in big chords, they omit the fifth because it's not really critical. You're not going to die without it. So that is not there. Now to do this, right, C, F, B flat, D, you play the C bass with the B flat major button. So you get your C with your C bass, and you get your B flat major button, gives you, of course, your B flat, your D, and your F. So even though the D's thrown in, it's not the same as the 7th, but it makes a little bit of sweetness. And if you don't hold on to that chord too long and get ridiculous, then it resolves nicely into your C7. And you'll get this C7, as we said, if you play the regular traditional C7 on the accordion. But if you want to get that 5th, if you really think you need it, that G, then you play the C bass with the G diminished button. And then you'll have that nice transition. See here, you would be going from the C bass with the B flat major. You would be going from this, that's this, to this. That's what you're doing. And that's the sound that you would get, the sound that you heard me play on the accordion. All right? Let me erase all that. Now, while I'm at it, while we're here, quickly, I'll go as fast as I can. On the accordion, as I mentioned, on the diminished row, the bottom row, that's actually, technically speaking, a diminished 7 or 7th, diminished 7th row. In other words, a diminished 7 or a diminished 7th, you would call it. Because just like with the 7th chord button row, on the diminished 7th chord button row, the 5th is missing. So if you wanted to play, here's a C diminished, that's how I write it. You might write it like this, C diminished. Let's say C diminished 7. All right, I would write it like that. Actually, I wouldn't write it like that, but we won't get into that. You get confused. Now, so then you'd have the tones C, E flat, G flat, and B double flat for a C diminished 7. But in that diminished button row, as I mentioned a zillion times, the 5th is not sounded. It doesn't sound. So, if you want to play that, C diminished 7 with the omitted 5th, you just play your C button and your C diminished 7 button, like on the accordion. They're right there. They're right in a row. That's the traditional hand position. But if you want to play the full C diminished chord with the G flat, all right, you would play the C bass, all right, and the F sharp diminished button, and you play this with the thumb. So here's the 5-finger deal. You play the C bass on the bass row, and you play the F diminished button, if you can see that, with your thumb. And if you do that, you'll get all 4 tones of the C diminished 7. The F sharp diminished button would be played with the thumb. To do it without the thumb would be very difficult, perhaps even impossible. Okay? So I'm going to wrap this up now, because it always goes long. It's too hard to do this in 3-4 minutes. It's just too much to tell you. So this is kind of a review and wrap up of the previous video, but I'm showing you so you can see it much better. The tones, the chords you need to mix, And if you need to, you can, and you're really interested, you really like this and want to try it, you can play the video and just pause it and write it down if you're a beginner, and then you'll get a clear idea. Once you review it a little bit, you get a real nice idea. So that's it. I'm going to say goodbye until I show up again, if indeed I do. Thank you.